I'm going to call to order this Lacey City Council meeting on October 22nd, 2020. And once again, we're complying with Governor Inslee's proclamation. So we're all remote this evening. Given that, we're gonna go to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God,
one nation,
indivisible, with liberty and justice
indivisible, with justice for all.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you for that. We do have an agenda and consent agenda items today. Is there any changes, or can I get a motion?
Move to approve the agenda and consent agenda as posted.
I second it, Cynthia Pratt.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. We have an agenda and we approved consent agenda items. First up is public comments on items not on the agenda. We did receive one written public comment, and that's going to be part of the record. And we have 3 people signed up for public comment today. And we'll first start off with Wayne Olson. Wayne, can you please keep your comments about 3 minutes?
Yes, thank you. Mayor Ryder, Deputy Mayor Pratt, council members. My name is Wayne Olson, a Lacey resident. I am a volunteer with several local climate advocacy groups, but I'm here mostly to represent my grandchildren. I would like to talk about a few of the building energy efficiency actions contained in the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. Several of you have expressed concerns that increased energy efficiency requirements for the sake of carbon emission reduction will drive up costs for homeowners, renters, and landlords. It will, but relatively very little initially. But it saves them money in the long run. For a home or commercial building, it is well documented that the incremental cost increase of upgrading from the minimum building code level to a highly efficient net zero ready is 2% to 4% of the building value, while upgrading all the way to net zero, that is buildings that produce as much energy as they consume, is under 10% of the building value. So here's the good part. The payback is enormous. Example, I had installed solar panels on the home that I owned prior to moving to Lacey, and subsequently avoided around about $1,000 a year on electricity cost. And the cost of solar continues to fall. The same system that I installed in 2015 is already 30% cheaper now. The U.S. National Renewable Energy Laboratory projects that the cost of solar installations will continue dropping to about $1.10 per watt by 2030, or about $7,700 for a 7-watt system supporting an average size Pacific Northwest home. $7,700 is certainly down in the range of minor haggling compared to the overall home price, especially when you spread the principal minus any new incentives over the life of a low interest 30-year mortgage. Remember that the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan is also a 30-year plan, the end of which in 2050 is about the same time that the scientists have concluded that the whole world needs to be near net zero carbon emissions to keep our world livable. Incentives for landlords are also proposed in the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan, including a local property tax reduction credit or other incentives for new buildings that meet energy efficiency performance standards. CPACER, enacted by the state law this year, helps owners of existing commercial buildings such as apartments make energy efficiency upgrades. The owner saves money through lower utility bills and easier financing, while renters receive the benefit of nicer and healthier living conditions, as well as potentially lower rent. These installations also mean jobs for installers, improving the local tax base. So please support the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. I think you'll like it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up under public comment is Clive Pennis.
How's that? Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
I'm curious, can you see me? Are you able to see me, or is this just audio?
It's just audio.
Okay, thanks. Mayor Ryder and members of the council, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon. My name is Cleveland Penix. Call me Cleve. My wife and I have been Lacey residents for nearly 5 years. We live in the Panorama Retirement Community, but we moved to Thurston County back in 1981, so we've seen things change here over about the past 4 decades. I'm here to just speak very briefly to ask that the council adopt the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan when it comes to you in the near future. I guess I have a little story for you. I first came to this country as a national park ranger way back in the 1960s. And back during that time, I was stationed at Paradise Ranger Station at Mount Rainier National Park. One of the big features at Mount Rainier at that time was something called the Paradise Glacier Ice Caves. They were a big attraction for visitors every summer. If you could have seen them, you'd see something the size of a railroad tunnel that was sapphire blue in color, a big tunnel underneath the glacial ice of the lower lobe of the Paradise Glacier. It was a very special place for a lot of people in the Northwest at that time. My wife and I several years ago thought we'd go back and revisit that place. We knew that the ice caves were no longer in place, but the area meant a lot to us. So we hiked the trail, not very much used at that time, and came up there in September a few years ago. We were stunned at what we saw. The entire lower lobe of the glacier is simply gone. Where there had been half a square mile of massive glacial ice, there's now only a barren rocky stream drainage. Nothing is the same. I'm old enough to remember the ice caves. Most of you aren't. But I think you'll love this region where we live because you're willing to commit your time and your talents to public service. Thank you for that. I talk with my neighbors here at Panorama. We are terribly concerned about the impacts climate change is having on our country and on this region. We're worried about our grandkids and those that will come after them. The terrible smoky air that engulfed us all this summer was a wake-up call. As Lacey residents, we hope you will heed that call. The Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan is our chance right now to work together to take the actions which will give us a chance to protect this home of ours for the future. We know the plan is a work in progress. There's lots to be done, but early adoption of the plan by Lacey is an important step because we can then move forward to the detailed work together, the sort of things that Wayne just talked about. Please take this crucial first step soon when the plan comes to you. You'll be doing something incredibly important for all of us. You will give us hope. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And our last person to sign up is Samuel Olson. Please keep your comments about 3 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, there doesn't appear to be anyone with that name signed up currently.
Okay. So we've reached the end of our public comment on items not on the agenda. Then we'll go on to our next agenda item, which is under ordinances, the Lacey Fire District 3 Mullen Road Annexation. So Ryan Andrews.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. So I'm coming to you today with the last step in an annexation process related to the Lacey Fire District 3 Mullen Road annexation. You have an ordinance in front of you this afternoon to consider for final approval. The annexation has fully been through the process. It's been reviewed by the Thurston County Boundary Review Board, and now this last step is ready to be taken in terms of approving the annexation. So the area shown on the screen here in purple, that's the Lacey urban growth area. Mullen Road runs along the south end of the property. To the west is Timberline High School, and to the south and east is Pattison Lake. The area includes about 67 acres in 5 separate tax parcels. We'll go forward a slide here. As you can see, most of the area for annexation is undeveloped. Most of it is a wetland complex that connects between Pattison Lake and Hicks Lake. Within the 5 parcels, there's 2 privately owned pieces of property, a house that's in the southwest corner of the annexation area, an undeveloped parcel that's on the north and east of Timberline High School. And then there are two other parcels along Mullen Road that are owned by other entities. One is the Lacey Fire District 3 Station 33. And then to the east of that is the Timberline Baptist Church. And then actually the property that's on the east boundary that runs the length of the annexation area is actually owned by the city of Lacey. So there's 2 privately owned parcels that we would be receiving some small amount of tax revenue from, but the rest is exempt from the payment of property taxes. And so there's relatively little to be gained in terms of revenue from this annexation. The zoning for the area, even though it is a variety of different uses, the zoning is low density residential, and upon annexation, then that zoning does remain the same in agreements we have with Thurston County. The last item I did want to mention related to the map is that the annexation area does not include the frontage of the fronting right-of-way associated with Mullen Road. Our standard agreement with Thurston County is that we do, with any annexation, take on the fronting right-of-way, but with this specific annexation and with the current state of the Mullen Road reconstruction project in that area, it makes it much cleaner that we do not annex Mullen Road at this time, because it might mean that we would have to take on additional burden in terms of having to participate in that construction project which Thurston County is undertaking right now. Discussions happen with Thurston County to solidify that and formalize that through the boundary review process. So it does come back to you now as proposed without the Mullen Road right away as well. I do want to make one mention of one additional item before you do consider this, which is we do need one. Staff is recommending one minor amendment to the ordinance here tonight, and that's within section 2, which is on your screen here. The blue underline is the area or the text that's proposed to be added, and this is related to a levy, a fire district levy, and not wanting to tax people twice for the same levy. So you might remember this has been part of previous annexation discussions, is that there's an existing fire district levy that is currently paid by Thurston County property owners that upon annexation, we do not want them to be paying twice. And so they'll pay the Thurston County portion, and the city would be willing to waive the city portion for the same levy, so that those 2 private property owners are not levied twice for that bonded indebtedness associated with the Fire District 3 levy. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the ordinance tonight with this one amendment. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Again,
I would make a
Move
motion.
that we adopt an ordinance to approve the Lacey Fire District 3 Mullen Road annexation.
Second.
Okay, second. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Cox.
I have a couple of quick questions. Primarily, Ryan, is you mentioned that the two property owners, we would waive the fire district tax and don't pay the county. Is that just for 1 year and then they would come in and pay our share, or is this a perpetual thing?
So as far as I'm aware, there are existing fire district, an existing fire district levy. There are existing parks levies. So there's a bunch of different levies that are paid by property owners. It's only relative to the fire district levy. And I believe that it's for the term of however long that levy is for. So they're paying the same amount or similar amount to what a city property owner is right now. And it would just make sure that they wouldn't pay that twice for the length of the levy, as long as that levy is in force.
Scott, you have something to add?
Just to clarify, so this is the voter approved debt that was approved in 2001. And this was at a time when we were a partner with Fire District 3 before the annex. So what this language is trying to prevent is the voters that voted for that same fire bond improvements are not paying for them twice. So this provision will no longer be necessary once that debt is actually retired. And ironically, I'll be talking about that in my budget presentation tonight because it'll be done by the end of next year.
Thank you for clearing that up. And then my second question to Ryan is the right of way that we are not annexing in this. What happens? I mean, this will be new pavement once the project is finished. Will we assume responsibility for maintaining it after this?
No, at this point, it will be the responsibility of Thurston County up to the point where it becomes the end of the city limits. So, any point past essentially Timberline High School is going to be the county's responsibility. It would be our responsibility if it was in the city, but there's no agreements with Thurston County that says we're taking responsibility for this portion.
Well, I don't know how Mr. Egger feels about it, but I kind of wish we were going to maintain that road.
Yeah. Well, the thing is the return. I think this council hopefully remembers this annexation came before us prior, initiated by Lacey Fire District 3 because they have a major addition they want to do, and they would like to use the city of Lacey for all their permitting, understandably. And so we went through this process, including the road, and the return. It was going to cost the city so much that it didn't make any sense, and so we had to reject it. Although the fire district still really wanted us to be annexed, and this conversation happened between a meeting we had with the county manager and the chair, and we brought this up again because we had a meeting with Fire District 3, and they said, well, all you have to do is just not include the right of way in the annexation, and we'll sign off on it. And we're like, oh, great, perfect. And so that's the whole process that got started over and why we're here today. So that's sort of the background on this annexation. And actually, we just talked to the fire district on Tuesday, and they're ready to submit some site plan reviews and everything. They're ready to go, which does lead me to one question. And I know Scott, Rick was going to look this up for us. Is at what day, at what point in time do they actually come into the city once hopefully this ordinance passes?
I can help answer that.
Okay.
So the annexation becomes official upon the passage of the ordinance, and then I believe it's the 5 days after the date of publishing. And once that happens, then they're officially part of the city of Lacey. For the purposes of, let's say, revenue or population or those kinds of things, that's usually effective so it would be the end of this quarter. So it would be December 31st for those kinds of, revenue calculations and population calculations and those kinds of things that require time to be able to prepare. But as far as the effective date of the ordinance, it'll be next week when they could come in and, pull a building permit, for example, with the city of Lacey.
Perfect. Well, that's good news. We'll get back to the chief on that. That was one of the questions he had. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, it's been moved and second to approve this Lacey Fire District 3 Mullen Road Annexation Project number 19-333. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you, Ryan. Next up, I don't have anything under the mayor's report, and so I'll go to the city manager's report, and today's budget presentation. Take it away, Mr. City Manager.
The favorite day of the year, I think, for everyone, right? So I'm going to share my screen. I was joking, but not joking to the mayor earlier that there is about 100 slides. So if you've not had a 100-slide presentation, you're in for a treat. So for those on council and those at home, be prepared. But again, it just shows you the comprehensive nature of the 2021 budget. So with that, I will share my screen. And can everyone see that?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. So I'll begin. Citizens of Lacey, Honorable Mayor and City Council and City staff. The budget for 2021 is heavily influenced by the public health crisis known as COVID-19. As a municipality in the state of Washington, our means to provide essential services to the community is dependent upon the relative strength of the economy. The current economy is not necessarily robust, nor is it at the level of the Great Recession. However, our local economy is still adapting and rebounding from the closures created by COVID-19. The proposed 2021 budget does maintain historical services to our approximately 53,000 residents, preserves the integrity of our organization, and continues to invest in critical public infrastructure as in previous years. During the drafting of the 2021 budget, projected revenues did not match estimated expenditures. This budget gap was addressed by using reserves. This strategy will allow us more time to gauge our future economic position. Additionally, it provides a less disruptive path by making incremental adjustments to delivery of services versus dramatic changes in services that would negatively impact our residents. So with that, I'd like to provide kind of a snapshot of our perspective on the economy, and sort of we titled this Cause for Caution. So you really cannot talk about the budget without talking about the pandemic. And I'm only going to cite the fact that we definitely are in historical times. COVID-19 has really changed everything, has impacted our operations as a city, and as obviously it has impacted the economy. It's pretty sobering to think that cases worldwide are over 41 million. At the state level, it's almost 100,000. And then here at the local level, we're at about 1,600 plus. So from a business perspective, we all know that COVID-19 caused significant total closures due to the stay home, stay healthy order by the governor. And looking at what Yelp is a very popular social media app that tracks businesses. And what they found is that there was 163,000 businesses that were closed due to COVID-19. Unfortunately, they're citing about 60% of those businesses that are closed are going to be permanently closed. So that is something to watch out for. If you take a closer look, obviously COVID-19 had a different impact for certain type of businesses and sectors. So obviously restaurants, shopping and retail was probably the hardest hit. And this graph shows really there's probably a 61% of those restaurants will not be returning after their closures. And even retail is suffering the same fate. Beauties, spas and salons and bars, as well as fitness centers also had similar impacts related to COVID-19. You know, another indicator of really the health of the business sector is bankruptcy. And this source basically said there's been 424 cited bankruptcies for the year 2020. So again, this is a measure of future economic health. This is something we are looking at too. But 424 business closures or bankruptcies have not been this high since the Great Recession. So again, this is also something that we're looking at. Maybe some notable closures that you're familiar with include JCPenney's, Neiman Marcus, and also Brooks Brothers. Another thing that we're tracking is just the initial unemployment filing. So these are people that are newly on the ranks of the unemployed. So the latest month of October 10th, or latest week, we had almost 900 initial filings for unemployment. Another concern is really just the increased numbers of long-term unemployed, which is typically factored as 26 weeks or longer. From August to September, that number jumped from 1.6 to 2.4 million. If you also look at the unemployment rate as a barometer for just economic health, obviously COVID-19 caused a great disruption early on. And so unemployment rate peaked about 14.7. Right now it's about 7.9 for September. In comparison, the Great Recession peaked about 10%, but this is something that we're looking at in terms of a trend and what is the viability of the economic future that we're going to have even nationally and locally. As we all know, COVID-19 are changing habits just within the market. A couple things that's kind of interesting when you look at what businesses are doing to adapt. Retailers that had curbside pickup in December 2019 was less than 7%. Now with COVID, you're seeing 43.7% adoption of that. Pretty amazing. When you look at online sales growth, the chart shows in April went up by 49%, in May at 78%, and June at 76%. Now this is obviously a direct result of people trying to social distance. And so they're finding other avenues to buy the same retail goods that they're looking for. One thing that I think we all know, that everyone's familiar with Amazon and the power of Amazon, their profit doubled in the second quarter. It went from 2.6 billion to 5.2 billion in terms of growth year over year. What is ironic about this one is they spent an additional $4 billion in COVID-related costs. So despite those $4 billion in charges, they actually made a pretty good profit year to year. Obviously, there's winners and losers related to COVID, and they are somewhat significant. I mentioned Amazon again. Amazon, April through June, accounted for half of all online sales in the United States. That represents about 14% of all retail in the country. Peloton, some people may have heard of that, but Peloton is a stationary bike company. They added 31 million people, or doubled their membership, and increased revenues by $500 million. And then video game consoles become very popular in COVID-19. Nintendo actually increased profits by 200%. On the other side of that, airlines have suffered due to COVID-19. Airlines are carrying about 68% less travelers compared to a year ago. And movie theaters are another one that have struggled. AMC, the largest theater chain in the country, reported a 99% loss in revenues in the second quarter. And then the Regal movie chain announced it was going to close all 536 theaters, including the one in Lacey, nationwide with no opening date. And they have about 40,000 employees that they furloughed because of that. So our economic outlook from a local perspective, I always like to provide council just kind of what's going on here locally in terms of our economic strength. So council may have seen this slide before, but this is updated for 2020. What this shows essentially is that we've had no retail development in the last 6 years that have been over 10,000 square feet. Now, given with COVID, this is going to be further challenged, but this shows some of our struggles as a city of not being able to get more retail, which, as you know, is the largest source of revenue to pay for general fund services. New home construction is still below 300 for the last 4 years. In the past, single family residential construction was a large economic activity within the city of Lacey, but you're seeing those numbers dwindle here in the last 4 years. So again, we can't rely on single family construction as a economic development sort of tool. So that's something also that we're looking at. Part of the issue too is just the available lots. And we've talked about this. In reality, Lacey is getting close to being built out. So there's about 280 total lots within our market as of today. And less than 200 of those lots are buildable. So again, that shows part of the reason why we have a constrained market, but that shows the total available lots within the city of Lacey. Multifamily does continue to show an increase within the city of Lacey. That has been one of the bright spots within our community. From 2016, we've had about 1,800 units were permitted in the city of Lacey. So again, we've had strong multifamily housing construction within Lacey. And then new commercial development. This is something where I think we all recognize that we've experienced some large commercial development. This would include industrial, commercial, or even retail, although we haven't had any. But the primary reason we've had increases in the last 4 years is really warehouse construction. That's been the primary driver. But again, that's not going to be sustainable forever. This year, you're starting to see that tail off. and we have just a little over 400,000 square feet of new commercial development within the city of Lacey. And then going back to retail sales, again, council's aware of this too, but for the city of Lacey, we rank 74th in the state of Washington of 281 cities in terms of our rank of retail sales per capita. So that's behind Tumwater, Olympia, Leavenworth, Tukwila. But we're the 25th populous city in the state of Washington for 2019. So again, this is a noted imbalance and something that we're aware of, but this does show some of our economic weakness to pay for services. And then here's another sort of graph that just shows general merchandise. And I think we're all aware that general merchandise is the one source of revenue that is sustainable. But what this clearly shows is that we have retail that's not keeping up with population growth. Now, this trend may turn if there's more online shopping, because the receipts typically go to, well, they do go to the jurisdiction of where the people are shopping from. But again, this has been flat for a number of years, despite that we've had fairly good 2 to 3% growth within the community. So the total budget. So for 2021, the total budget is going to be almost $169 million. The general fund, we'll talk about later in more detail, is about 31% of that total budget, but that's just under $52 million. Going further into it, here's a history of the last 6 years of total budget within the city of Lacey. Really, the fluctuations year to year really cannot be explained, other than the fact that this also demonstrates the level of activity when it comes to utility construction, road construction, and so that's the different variances between the years from 2015 to 2021. One thing I'd like to point out is that we have 29 different funds within the city of Lacey that we basically track taxpayer dollars as well as our utility customers. I think this is another example that just shows how complex the city of Lacey budget is, but it also should give confidence to taxpayers and utility rate customers that we are watching where that money goes, and we have different restrictions or requirements in how we account for those dollars. So as I said before, we have $169 million total budget. Maybe a more simplified way to kind of break down our budget, instead of using 29 funds, you can really break those up into 6 different funds. So the general fund is really our typical fund that pays for our basic services. When we think of our streets, our parks, our police department, and public works, that basically encapsulates that. So as I stated before, that is about a 31% of the total budget. I want to briefly just go with the different changes from last year compared to this year. Now, this is a comparison between our amended budget. So you're seeing a slight decline, or not a slight decline, you're seeing about a 14% decline in the general fund. And that's primarily due to all the efforts that council did related to COVID. So COVID-19 relief, as you know, we received about $2.3 million from the state. That's not going to be a recurring expense for 2021. So that's why you're seeing a decrease. Council also did the Lacey Business Stabilization Fund for about $1 million. Again, that's not a recurring cost. And then we also received about $2.5 million in grants to improve the Lacey Veteran Services Hub. So that accounts for really the majority of the difference in there, even though there's increased costs within the general fund. Capital projects is about 9% of the total budget. That experienced about a $3.1 million decrease. And this is really just a result of less construction activity. You may recall that we did work on a museum/civic center in terms of design. Again, that won't be a recurring cost in the future. We also did enhancements with the Lacey Library, and we also replaced 2 major fields at the RAC. So again, that accounts for some of that decrease. Capital projects also includes the Transportation Benefit District Fund, as well as arterial streets. And both of those funds pretty much offset each other. The Transportation Benefit District Fund will go up about $1.5 million, but then you'll go down probably about $1 million in the arterial street fund due to the fact that the College Street and 22nd Roundabout project is now finished. Now, special funds consist of really 3 funds. That includes the Hicks Lake Management District, Community Development Block Grants, and also the Lodging Tax Fund. The only reason you're seeing an increase in that, which seems significant, but is that we're projecting slightly higher revenues in LTAC revenues. You may recall we were fairly conservative when we amended the budget when it came to the 2021 amended budget responding to COVID. And so we're projecting next year we'll have a little bit more revenue in that fund. Debt service is really unchanged. The utility funds obviously include stormwater, wastewater, and water. The increase is really attributed to the water capital. We expect to spend about $10 million more in the water fund than we did in last year, and that accounts for that increase. And then internal service funds are the two funds that we track our fleet, which is our rolling stock, and also information services. So those are internal charges to the organization, and we have relatively the same amount of spending that we had in 2020 as we do in 2021. So I want to comment on the Lacey workforce for just a minute. So this graph represents really what the total budget supports in terms of the Lacey workforce. We have 286 full-time equivalents, or FTEs. The majority of our workforce is funded out of the general fund, about 80%, but that shows the breakdown between our folks that work for the utilities and those other employees that work on behalf of the general fund. This graph shows really kind of the history of our hiring. Again, since our workforce is our greatest asset, this is something that we're mindful of in terms of how much investment we make in that to serve the community. But you will notice during the Great Recession, we did start to flatten off, and then we actually reduced given the concern and also the inability to actually have more revenue coming in. And so we had a period of time there really from about 2009 to 2016 where we were not hiring, and you see that within the timeline of full-time employees. And then eventually by 2017, we were able to hire more as the economy got better. But now we're in a situation with COVID-19 that we have basically peaked at 2020. And now we're going to be in a similar holding pattern that we're not going to be able to add additional workforce until we have a better understanding where the economy is going. And then we show this graph just to, I think it illustrates the fact that we are an efficient city government. What this basically demonstrates that we have 5.41 employees per 1,000. If you back that up to really 2013, it's about that equivalent. So we're actually serving a greater population with fewer number of employees. One thing I'd like to point out, if you took a base year of say 2011, we would actually have a workforce that'd be closer to 210. We'd have a workforce closer than 314, or about almost 30 people. So to serve the public using the same per 1,000 equivalent. So again, this is a little bit of forced efficiency, just given the fact that we have less people serving the public with our population. So balancing the budget, as I mentioned early on during the presentation, we went into the budget and we had a $2.4 million gap. Now, I'd like to explain that a little bit. What that means is essentially with our estimated expenditures and then what our estimated revenues were, simply put, projected revenues did not meet projected expenditures. And so this is after incorporating the budget reductions that we identified in 2020 in response to COVID. But we still, the $2.4 million budget gap was identified in the general fund. Now, there's too many line items that this impacts to kind of be able to sort of, draw a straight line to show how the 2.4 million and where all the revenues go. But I want to kind of just as a big picture discussion, explain where we're seeing basically revenue pressures and then where we're seeing expenditure pressures. So essentially, we're going to have about $786,000 less in sales tax. Same goes for B&O tax, about less than $500,000. Utility tax, admission tax, I've already mentioned, is going to be a closure with Regal Cinemas, and also gambling tax. We do have a card room game that's within the city of Lacey that does provide revenue to the general fund. So on one hand, you have revenues that are declining or going down. And on the other hand, trying to maintain a 286 employee workforce, we have cost pressures. So we are going to see labor costs go up about $676,000, and also the associated benefits that go along with that. So in sum, we came into the budget, again, after doing budget reductions, identifying a $2.4 million budget gap. Now, as we talked with the city council during the budget workshop, we are using a combination of assigned reserves as well as committed reserves. And so this screen just shows that this is how we're going to shore up the $2.4 million budget gap. I would point out the fact that the reason you have reserves is to basically respond to times like this of uncertainty when you don't know where the economy is going to go. This is a conservative approach to make sure that we're not adversely impacting the community by making radical reductions to services or unnecessarily laying off workforce when maybe it doesn't need to. So that is the approach that we are going to balance the budget by using those reserves of $2.4 million. So now that we've balanced the budget, now let's just talk about the general fund. And again, this is probably the portion of the budget that people are most interested, because this is where you receive your direct services of police, streets, parks, and everything that you think of. So again, $52 million roughly is the general fund for the 2021 budget. As I mentioned before, this is about a 31% of the total budget. Essentially, this is how we pay for our most basic services within the city of Lacey. So sales tax, we project to have $11.78 million. Service fees, about 9.79. These are direct fees that offset the cost of services. So think of building or community development fees, parks and recreational fees, as well as internal charges for public works to support capital projects. Obviously, property tax, utility tax. This is where this is actually a large source of revenue for the city of Lacey. You also have B&O tax. You have state share tax that we get from fuel, liquor, as well as criminal justice and marijuana revenues. And then we have indirect costs, which is really our overhead costs associated with managing the 3 utilities. And then all the revenues are essentially money coming off from our fund balances. So think of your beginning balances. That's going to be about a $4.5 million. Plus you're seeing other transactions related to accounting, such as budget transfers, which includes interest earnings and other revenue. So again, here's our sales tax history of all funds. This just points out graphically that we are projecting less revenue for 2021. And again, it's in that 780,000 arena. But this is trying to show a loss of sales tax compared to the beginning of 2020. Fortunately, we did not receive or did not experience a 3.7 million reduction in sales tax that we projected during the middle of 2020. But we do not think that sales tax are going to grow beyond what we thought they were going to go last year. Property tax revenue for 2010, we actually will be collecting 7.52 million. This assumes that we're doing the 1% adjustment. What's in that adjustment is the $71,457,000 related to the 1% limitation, and also an additional 306,000 plus related to new construction. Some people ask why 2010 saw an abrupt drop off. It kind of relates to the question earlier. When Fire District 3 annexed the city of Lacey, they provided fire service, whereas before the city used to contract for that service. And so council at that time made a promise to take the equivalent amount it costs to pay for those services and reduce that from the general fund, knowing that city ratepayers or taxpayers would be paying for that service out of their new property taxes, Fire District 3. And then this is our assessed valuation. It has obviously grown as we have climbed out of the Great Recession. We are now approaching about $8 billion. Those that understand the property tax rate, anytime that our assessed valuation goes up, then that means our regular tax levy rate will fall. And so for 2021, we will be a little bit less than last year's at 0.98 to 0.97 for 2021. This is the lowest levy rate that we have had within the city of Lacey's history. And on the expenditure side, this is how we pay for costs. So obviously public safety is our most expensive service that we provide to the public at almost $16 million. Public Works is the largest department in terms of employees and personnel. They're about $13.6 million. Admin support services includes costs associated with the city manager's office, public affairs, and city council. Capital transfers are those transfers related to hydrant maintenance, as well as utility tax that support other items within the budget. Parks and Rec is self-explanatory, and then you have community development and common facilities. And so again, that's where the other side of the balance sheet, you find your almost $52 million for the general fund. As pointed out, this is how we distribute labor within the general fund. So you have almost 86 employees within Public Works, 77 within police. That includes about 60 plus commissioned officers. And then you have admin support or general services like the CM, the finance department, city clerk, public affairs, and HR, 38. And then you have 18 in community development and 16 in Parks and Rec. So I think it's always important for the public to know what services cost. And we did this last year, and I think it's informative to find out what elements. It's one thing to say that public safety costs $15.7 million, but what are those elements that actually make up that cost? So, and starting with public safety, just want to point out our police department costs about $13.5 million. If you just wanted to capture what it costs in patrol, that number is just under $8.4 million. When it comes to prosecution, if someone does get arrested or fined, then they have to go through the process, the legal process. So prosecution support is about $400,000. And then there's court services. We pay for indigent defense if you are unable to afford that, but we also have to pay for the court facilities to provide that judicial review. That's under $900,000. We also have jail services through Nisqually. Again, that's about $900,000, and that's how you get to $15.7 million. That is basically the spectrum of public safety within the city of Lacey. Now, just as a reminder, when you think of property taxes only equal $7.52 million. So again, that's less than half of what is needed to pay for public safety. So that we can apply that same sort of scenario to the cost for Parks and Rec. So again, Parks and Rec, just general activities. When we think of what Parks and Rec does in terms of activities, classes, and events, that's $2.6 million. We still do have an aquatics program, even under COVID-19. That's about $600,000. To support the regional athletic complex, that's about $1.2 million. Our other large park is Rainier Vista. That's just under $500,000. And then to maintain the rest of the park property that we have, which is about 1,000 acres, is about $1.7 million. So essentially that's how we look at Parks and Rec. And then we talk about maintenance of roads. We're pretty proud of the fact that we have some of the best roads within the state of Washington. We do a really good job. But we look at our street department, generally, it's about a $1.2 million function in the general fund. When you look at the maintenance requirements of the roadways that we currently have, that equates to about $1.1 million. We do maintain about 5,000 streetlights. Lane miles are almost over 380. And then there's basically your maintenance of streetlights and also the bill associated with that. You have your signs and markings, and you also have sidewalk repair. So it's about a $4 million operation. And so again, what we employ for the city workforce at 286,000 or 286 FTE, salaries and wages for those employees are about 22 million. And then the benefits associated with that were about 8.2. So labor costs within the general fund and benefits are about 66% of our total budget. And that's after taking out capital and transfers, but that gives you an idea of about 45.7 million is related to our total budget. Again, once capital transfers are taken out, and then you have about 30.3 million associated in labor costs. So let's talk about some of the public investments that you expect for 2021. So we mentioned street lights. We have continued to replace our street lights, those high pressured sodium lights, with LEDs. We are now in the 5th, almost 6th year of that program. This is going to be a 10-year program to phase all those out. The benefit of that program, we've already yielded a $200,000 saving in electrical savings for power. So that has been a really good program. At some point, we still need to continue to look at the facilities we have to serve the public. And so we are going to do a city facility needs analysis to make sure the facilities we have are right size for our population. That may even change now in light of COVID and what our ability is to do teleworking, but that is something that we do need to do for next year. You may recall that we are finishing up our police station analysis. We've not had a brand new police station, or the first police station for the city of Lacey was built in 1985, and it is due for a revisit in terms of what do we need for expansion. However, we need to do some things in interim because it's going to be a while before we go back to council and talk about what are the needs for a new police station for the community. So we have set aside about $500,000 to look at workstation improvements for our officers. That would not only include the police station itself, but also our south substation and other substation that we have serving the public.
When was the last time? 1985, you said?
Correct. We also have the need to upgrade our security access to our buildings. Our system right now is about 12 years old. And so as you can kind of see in these pictures, these are the swipe cards to gain access to the city after hours. So what this means that we need to replace some of that hardware, also update the new software. So we have $100,000 to set aside for that project. The rack parking lot design is also included within the city budget for 2021. You notice the area in yellow just north of the baseball and softball fields. If you've ever been out to the rack during the winter months or spring months, you may know that that's not a hard surfaced area and it's becoming more of a challenge to keep up with maintenance, but is long overdue for a parking lot to have a hard surface to ensure that we're using that property to the best possible use. We also have the street overlay program that's programmed in for next year. The majority or bulk of that $4.4 million is going to take place at Carpenter Road from 26th Court all the way down to Mullen. That will intersect the new county project where they're building a brand new modern roundabout. If you've been on Carpenter Road, it's definitely showing its age. And we also have a couple projects just off of the roundabout at Willamette and also off of Orion up in Northeast Lacey. We do have some fleet replacement that we're going to be doing for 2021. The large truck that you see with I'll say the boom on it is actually a vacuum or a truck to actually take effluent from step tanks. So we service multiple step tanks in our UGA as well as our city limits to take out the sewer. And so we're going to be buying a new 3,400 gallon septic pumper truck, and that will replace our old one. And then to the right is a 100,000 plus, believe it or not, mower that maintains our park system. So that's those are two investments we'll be making in the fleet for 2021.
That's a very cute mower.
And then Red Oak Road Council knows about this. You did pass the construction contract for this, but the bulk of the work is going to happen in 2021. This is the area where we have failing retaining walls. And so we are going to fix the retaining walls and the sidewalks, but also this project will be adding lighting, which will be improvement for this section of Red Oak Road. And then the Mayor's Gala. This is included, and I think we recognize that with COVID, we don't know what can happen in person. The assumption is that this will probably be a virtual event, but we've had a long-standing support for our veterans in our community. And so, as you know, the Mayor's Gala has been an avenue for charitable giving to support the Lacey Veteran Services Hub. So $25,000 is included within the budget. And then also we've included $200,000 from our Economic Strategic Development Fund and looking to form a partnership with St. Martin's University to see if we cannot examine, if not create a incubator environment for entrepreneurs. This is one of those things where we constantly have to look at what can we do to somewhat guide or shape our economic future. So this is something that we're going to explore. If we actually do come up with a program before we spend the money, this would go back to council for final approval. I do want to mention some major initiatives that we have that are worth mentioning as part of the budget. The first one is housing and homelessness. Again, this is an area that we are spending a lot of time as well as resources on. About $600,000 plus are going to be included in the 2021 budget. Some of the things I will note, this still supports our social services navigator, which has been very successful, embedded with our police department. We have about $100,000 for shelter resources. This is to prepare what other outcomes or discussions or decisions that come out of the Regional Housing Council. We do have the affordable and supportive housing. This is, if you recall, the new legislation or 1046 that allows cities to spend dollars related to that supportive housing. So that's new revenue, and we've identified that in the budget. As you know, we've had issues with targeted cleanup related to homeless encampments. So we have dollar amount in there. And then plus there's a potential to do something with some support for emergency cold weather during the coming year. So we have some money included in that for that.
Was this the 65 basis points that the state gave us? Was it 65? Based on sales tax that we didn't have to return to them?
Correct. This is, yeah, this is state dollars that they're transforming, correct. And then this is our portion of that. So the $110,000 is our portion of that 1046 refers to the bill, which to your point is diversion of sales tax from the state to the cities. Obviously, we're still supporting Lacey Veteran Services Hub. That cost is about just $132,000. Pretty amazing what the city has done and city council has taken in terms of leadership on this issue. We're well serving 6,000 plus unique service related issues for veterans. Runs a gamut from housing assistance to veteran benefits assistance, and also for mental health assistance through the federal VA. So again, very important program. Council obviously has made a discussion or initiated a discussion about race and equity. And critical to that, I think, discussion is recognition that the city of Lacey is the most diverse community within Thurston County. We do have a working group that's been formed, and they will be making a formal recommendation to council. Some of the things that they're working on, they believe a 3-part strategy to continue this discussion would include education and critical conversations, inclusivity, as also an equity assessment. And so there's $25,000 included in the budget to support that effort. Now, I did add the climate action plan just because the year is coming near to an end. We still have not finished the public process yet related to the climate action plan, but I thought at least would be important that this $100,000 would be carried over into the 2021 budget. Once those priorities have been identified, and then once council's had a final discussion to make formal recommendations on the climate action plan. So that will obviously be included for 2021. So now to the utilities. Obviously the utilities are really, if you took them as a standalone department or enterprise, that's 56% of our total budget. That is bigger than our general fund, given the associated costs for maintenance, for capital, as well as debt. That's fast approaching $94 million. This is just a quick overview, but if you took all the assets of those 3 utilities, we're looking close to $250 million. We have 20 wells within the city of Lacey. We have 7 reservoirs. We have 3,400 step tanks. That's another reason why we needed the step sucker truck, for lack of a better word. We have 200 miles of sewer mains. And if you look at just catch basins alone, we have well over 5,000. So again, you can give an understanding of the scope and complexity, again, of the utilities that we do manage for our ratepayers. When you look at the customer breakdown, just very quickly, we have the most customers in water at just over 26,000, and then the least in stormwater. Part of the reason we do not have stormwater customers in UGA, that is taken care of by Thurston County. But once those areas are annexed, those then become part of the city. But that gives you a breakdown of our customer base within all 3 utilities. So just a quick comparison with this graph. I just wanted to show on 2021, that's the top graph. That's what our current expenditures for each of the utilities. And then below it is the previous year. And so I just wanted to highlight the fact that there is going to be significant growth within water construction for 2021. But basically for water, you have a 14 million M&O operating budget. We have almost $34 million of planned capital improvements, and you have about $4.42 million worth of debt. And then likewise in wastewater, you have just about 19 million in M&O. About 2/3 of that actually does go to LOT, about 12.8 of that, or 2/3. And that's essentially a pass-through, but we basically give that to LOT for the treatment center. And then stormwater, which is our smallest of the utilities, is still an $8 million operation once you include M&O, the debt, as well as the planned improvements. So when you look at the utility rate comparisons, council has always been concerned about just the impact on rates to our residents and ratepayers. The 2020 rates are captured in sort of the bracket. We are just slightly under the city of Olympia. This is based on a 900 cubic foot average consumption for water customers. It's too hard to kind of try to give your, what your commercial user or other maybe business users, but that provides a baseline for your average customer. In this budget, we're proposing that rates are delayed by the first 6 months. So for the first 6 months, your monthly bill will be roughly $110.70. Then effective July 1, that would then go up to $112.93 So that shows the effect of having that rate delay. And so again, we talked about this at the budget workshop. The current total budget for 2021 proposes that rate delay until July 1. And so let's look at the improvements in the utilities. We have a need to expand the facility on Riddle Road. It's actually really hard to see. It's actually in a depression. If you drove by it every day, you probably wouldn't know it was there. But we're receiving more stormwater for this basin, and we need to buy those adjacent parcels that are identified. And so we have money set aside for potential purchase to expand that facility. We have a sewer lift station that we call Lift Station 3. It's located off of Golf Club Road and 26th. This is one of our older stations. Actually, it's 50 years old. And so we need to upgrade and replace that lift station. There's a picture to the right is what it would sort of look like once that project is completed. That's what our designs look like once those lift stations are completed. We do have some money set aside for utility maintenance rehabilitation. On the picture to the left just shows the corrosive effect of wastewater. And then what we do is we go in and actually do a rehab to preserve the integrity of the concrete. And so that's kind of before and after. We're hoping to do at least a half dozen maintenance holes on that. As you know, there's going to be a significant amount and continues to be a significant amount in the Capital City Golf Club Estates area. So originally, part of the discussion with septic to sewer coincided with our need to upgrade that area with fire flow. So we're going to be spending another $1 million in trying to upgrade those water lines to meet those fire flow requirements. So this will be the second year of that project.
Hey, Scott.
Yes.
Is are the Capital City homes included in all these numbers and estimates, and they're being, attached and apart and annexed into the city?
At this point, they're not being annexed into the city, so they're still outside of the city. That's a future discussion for council if they want to invoke their powers of attorney, and that will be a future discussion, probably at the committee level.
Yeah, and we need to start that right away. I've already had conversations with Rick Walk about this and the city manager, and I would propose that we get those conversations underway just for exactly what you're talking about, council members, so we can start at least realizing some of this return on the investment.
Agreed.
So continuing with the Capital City Golf Club Estates, so obviously septic abandonment is a major effort on that. So we have programmed $5.25 million for 2021. Eventually 400 homes will be connected to city sewer once this project is done. Again, this is the second year of this project. And then obviously you have to have sewer lines to be able to connect all those homes to sewer. And so that effort is about 5.1. So all told, you're looking at over a 17 million plus project once it's all done. If you take those three components, which is, your septic abandonment, the sewer, and also the water.
Have they applied to LOT for that rebate that is being allowed now?
I would have to talk to Scott about that, but I believe if we were going to apply for rebates, it would apply to the city since the city is bearing the cost of that conversion. So another big project that we have planned is the Hawks Prairie Reservoir Rehabilitation Project. If you look to the left, you can see the existing reservoir is having corrosion, and then we need to basically take that offline and actually address that and fix that. To do that, we're going to have to take that offline and then build a new reservoir, and the new reservoir will allow to maintain pressures as well as water supply in the area while we're fixing the existing reservoir. So the picture to the right shows the proposed new reservoir as we fix the existing treatment or the existing reservoir. That project total will be about a $19.3 million project once it's done. And then another reservoir project, and this is kind of implies why we're having so much construction activity within the water fund this year. The 337 zone, the Terry Cargill Reservoir, I think has been mentioned before. We are building a brand new reservoir. This is a unique composite elevated tank. This is the first of kind within the city of Lacey. And this will begin this year. So this is going to be a $4 million project for 2021. But all said and done, it's going to be about a $9 million project for this 1.25 million gallon reservoir. So we mentioned the capital city and the septic to sewer conversion project, and it's worth talking about again, given the impact on the budget. But just as a reminder, again, we're spending about $17 million related to the septic conversion project. The water flow is about 7 million. So I may have misspoke earlier. So the total project is about 25 million. 7 million is related to water flow, and then the remainder is related to the septic to sewer conversion. As council know, this has been a very difficult problem to deal with urban septic tanks. Not just the environmental impacts, but just the impact it has on ratepayers. But again, just want to show this is what the total cost that we are expecting to complete this project.
Hey, Scott?
Yes.
Is there a number on if we were to lose well, is it well 3 or well 4 down there over a 5-year period of time or whatever? Is there an estimate of anything about that if we were to have to take that well offline?
So you may recall we did talk about this in a work session. We believe that we would be spending more than $17 million if we had to do a treatment facility. I think there's also just an issue with knowingly allow a water resource to be contaminated. That doesn't sort of fit within the ethics and integrity of a water system to allow something that we knowingly could have prevented. So to your point, again, we believe it would be more than $17 million to
Thank you.
Facility.
Because I think that's important for people to know when they're going over this.
So speaking of, I guess just the nitrate levels. So just as a reminder, maybe for council as well as the public, Capital City surrounds well 4, and as we have been under monitoring for a while now, because our nitrate level has been more than 4 milligrams per liter and spiked even higher than that. And what this graph demonstrates that as the higher you go on the nitrate level, your water does become no longer potable and has to be treated. So we're trying to prevent us having to build a treatment facility, which as you go up, if you get closer to the 10 milligrams per liter, that would be the requirement from the health department. Well 4 is a shallow well. It's less than 100 feet. And again, what we're trying to do is prevent contamination of that well. The reason that we believe there's a nexus from septic tanks to our well source is because when we did our water quality monitoring studies, we actually found artificial sweetener within our water. And really the only way artificial sweetener could get into the well source is through septic tanks, because artificial sweetener, as you know, does not break down the body and it gets passed through. And so that is basically the recognition that there is a nexus between septic tanks and to the source of water. So that is why we are now trying to do the septic to sewer project. So as you know, and I go back to the cost, this is $17.7 million cost. The goal when we talked about this last year was to get up to a $2.5 million annual program and then pay this over basically over 10 years. We were trying to give ourselves 7 years to figure out the appropriate rate to either be a combination of water and sewer. As council knows, we are currently going through our water comprehensive plan. We're also going through our wastewater program, and we want both of those plans to inform this decision. So for the second year, we are going to use reserves to essentially keep on track with the annual program goal of 2.5 million. This chart is supposed to demonstrate if we would have raised rates in year 1, it would have raised $357,000. Again, that was taken on reserves. For year 2, we're going to need $714,000 to keep up with the payments for this program. And so hopefully by year 3, we'll have both those plans to inform what is the most equitable rate to pay for this really water quality assurance fee. So I want to go to lodging tax, which is another area that is of interest to the city of Lacey. Obviously, we have 8 hotels within the city, 652 rooms, and we apply a 4% lodging tax to those rooms. So if we had a $100 room charge, we would get $4 back. And this is how we fund events and programs out of our LTAC fund. This is a history of the lodging tax budgets. As you can see in 2020, we took a huge dip, and this is directly related to COVID. At some point, we had reductions in hotel occupancy as low as 20 to 30%. Those have elevated a little bit, but not much. We're adding just under 100,000 more revenue to revenues for LTAC for 2021. But the reality is in 2020, we had to cancel, not cancel, it wasn't our decision to cancel. We could not support the events given COVID-19. Eventually, all these events were canceled, but LTAC had to make the tough decision that they could not provide revenue that they didn't have to events that may or may not have been held. They have the same challenge for 2021. We do not know what the future is going to hold for community events. And so the decision that LTAC made was to look at our partners that are basically non-community event dependent. And so we looked at Washington Center in terms of preserving that asset. Obviously the RAC is functioning, but not the same level, but trying to preserve that asset. The Lacey Museum, as well as the Lacey South Sound Chamber, and also the BCB. So that is the recommendation for the 5 entities that are going to be funded out of LTAC for 2021.
So Scott, before we go on, I noticed that in the budget, a draft budget we have, that it looks like we're taking over for next year the Lacey Spring Fun Fair from the nonprofit to the city. Is that correct?
That is accurate. We've been working on a transition plan for a while now, where the volunteers for Lacey Spring Fun Fair are transitioning out of those roles. And so Parks and Rec have taken a more active role in that event. Since it's a very important event to the community, that we are taking a more direct role of that. So that is correct.
And Scott, where are we at on maybe looking at their 50? They have a 501c4, right? And converting it to a 501c3 for the city of Lacey.
That is true. That work is still being reviewed right now, and Parks and Rec is working with Lacey Community Events, who currently holds that nonprofit status, to see what the conversion would look like.
Okay, I just don't want that to get lost, because it'd be nice to get that going sooner than later, so we have that for our residents and future projects.
Correct. Hey, this is something I believe, and I've mentioned this before in the past, the council should be very proud of the fact that we have a great debt position. What this chart demonstrates is that statutorily, we can have $545 million of debt that we could issue. That doesn't necessarily mean we can afford it, but again, from a statutory standpoint, that is our debt limit. We have $15.6 million in outstanding debt. And again, I think that's a testament to how we treat our basically most precious resource, which is taxpayer dollars too. But that's about less than 3% of our taxing or debt authority, if you will. So I think that's also another reason why we do have a AAA rating, because of our ability in terms of our financial wherewithal and based on our debt position. This shows the outstanding debt instruments that we have. This is a combination of voter approved as well as utility debt related to obviously the 3 utilities. I will point out that for next year, by end of December, we will pay off the fire obligation. So ironically, the issue we talked about earlier today about the concern for voter approved debt related to fire actually will go away after 2021. So we will retire that entire $865,000. We'll have one payment this year, and then the final payment for next year. So that will be gone. But just to point out, we have roughly right now $15.6 million of debt, and our debt payments annually are about $2.4 million. So I did want to mention this, just given our current financial outlook. It's important that we revisit our 6-year plan. As you know, the council has had a draft 6-year plan before in the past that served us well. Given sort of, again, the financial uncertainty that COVID-19 has caused, I would also say just maybe some limited economic opportunities that we're not going to have in the short term. It makes sense to revisit this plan and actually have a full discussion with council, decide what are those tools that we're going to use in our 6-year plan to basically get us through essentially the next 6 years. And so this is something that we'll be working on with council in the coming year, and then look for formal adoption for 2021. And this will really be our roadmap for dealing with future budgets when we have similar challenges. I would like to talk about the value services when it comes to the city of Lacey. I feel pretty passionate about the fact that I think we provide a great service to the public. And when you look at the cost of those services, I think it's not just defensible, but it's pretty profound in terms of how we do our business. What this graph is trying to demonstrate is really just an average home. As I pointed out in 2010, that's when annexation by Fire District 3 occurred. That's why you're seeing a drop off by 2011. But really what this shows from really 2011 to 2020, you've really had barely a $61 increase in property taxes for the city portion. So the 1% limitation has worked in terms of controlling the growth of government from a city perspective. But that's basically what you'd be paying on an average home. So again, just trying to show what that has been for the last 10 years, $61 to provide those services.
And what are you calling an average home?
Roughly about, the 330 range, 340. So property taxes always comes up during times of budget and where does your money go? This shows 2020, since we don't know the 2021 rates for the rest of the taxing jurisdictions. But if you look at that, the biggest portions of your property tax bill do go to your schools, the state, then the fire district, then Thurston County, and we're about 5th on the line. And then you have some obviously minor taxing districts when you come to the library, Medic 1, and then Port of Olympia, and then the PUD. But that is where your every dollar of your tax goes as a percentage of tax dollars. Just a real quick maybe history of the last couple years. This shows 2019 versus 2020. And this shows the top 5 taxing jurisdictions. Other than say the state as well as the school, every other top 5 taxing jurisdictions have actually reduced their proportional share of sales or property tax. So again, the direct increase to those, the first 2 are related to the McCleary decision and dealing with the schools and the mandate by the Supreme Court. So again, when we look at Lacey property taxes for 2020 versus 2021, if you look at the average house for 21 at $350,000, at that time, our regular levy was about 98 cents. And then the excess levy was about 15 cents or almost 16. And that equated to about a $400 city proportional or the city's portion of the property tax to receive police services or park services, street maintenance, community development, anything that supports general fund operations. Assessed valuations grew roughly about 3.21% for the coming year. So that would have increased your average home to about $361,000. The new regular levy is a 0.97. Our excess levy rate went down because we've had growth within the community. So that's a savings. And so that total would be $404.39 for the 2021 total budget. I do like to try to compare, when you think of as a consumer, what you buy. So you, for $404 for the city of Lacey, you can have police services 24/7. You have access to over 1,200 acres of parks. You have 383 miles of well-maintained roads. You get that for $404. Your average cell phone bill per year is almost $1,400. Your average used car payment is close to $5,000, and your average cable bill is about $2,600. So I don't think that includes HBO or Cinemax or all those other additional channels. So again, this just goes back to the fact we provide a very good value to citizens of Lacey. So again, in summary of just in terms of what we're looking at, the impact of the 2021 budget, property tax per month would go up about 43 cents based on an average home of 361,000. Your water rate would increase at $1.04. Wastewater would go 66 cents and stormwater would be 53 cents, which would equate to $2.66 a month. I will point out the fact because of the delayed effect of the rates, there would be as a total for the annual year would be about $13.38. So that is the impact of the 2021 budget on our residents and ratepayers. So again, public participation is needed for our budgeting process and obviously welcomed. So the first opportunity that you can actually comment on the revenue sources, including property taxes, will be Thursday, November 5th. That's also going to be an opportunity to provide comment on the total budget. So residents have an opportunity to provide input on that also. This will be followed by another and final public hearing on the proposed budget. That'll be Thursday, November 19th. And then we have a scheduled adoption for the proposed 2021 budget for December 3rd, which is also on a Thursday. For folks that want to dive into the budget details, They can go to our website and you can download the budget at www.ci.lacey.wa.us/budget and find out basically how we pay for services for our residents. So before maybe I go for questions, I just do want to recognize the executive team. This has been more than a challenging year when it comes to trying to figure out a budget in light of COVID-19. So I want to appreciate the help and assistance of the executive team for being realistic in their asks and also approaches to this budgeting year. I also want to thank Troy Wu. Troy Wu and I work kind of eyeball to eyeball when it comes to the budget. Appreciate the collaborative nature. I'd like to recognize Christy Wolf as well as Chelsea Yarwood for helping out with the budget process too. If you look at the document, there is a lot of moving parts to that, and we depend on them greatly to actually get that done. I got to thank Donna Feliciano for helping with this budget presentation. It clearly was not me coming up with pretty graphics and the daffodils. The fact that I could recognize daffodils is a testament to my lack of knowledge in flowers. But anyway, so I do appreciate all the time and effort she's put into that. And also, I just want to thank the Lacey organization, all the employees. To say the least, this has been a difficult year, and trying to provide continuity of services, adapt and adjust to all the restrictions mandated by COVID, and still serve the public the way they did in 2020. I just want to acknowledge them and thank them for all the sacrifices they had to make for this year. So I do appreciate that. And so with that, council, I'd be happy to entertain.
Can you stop sharing your screen?
Absolutely. I'd love to entertain any questions after I stop sharing my screen.
I have to be able to see the council to figure that out. There you are, Councilmember Greenstein.
So Scott, first, thank you. That was an excellent presentation. I really appreciate it. And I agree, we have an incredible staff in the city of Lacey. So thank you to all of them. My only question really is, when it comes to the utility rates that we're talking about possibly 6 months out, what I would like to see, and I don't know how best to present this, but I'd like to see that we review it again in 6 months, not that we're in 6 months going to have the rate increase. I totally support reviewing it again. I'm not sure that in 6 months, mid-year, that we'll be in a position that we want to increase the rates. So I would like to see it, if possible, that we can review it in 6 months.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would agree with that. That doesn't hurt us at all to review it at 6 months in. It doesn't change anything. It keeps the rates where we all agree with your budget for the first 6 months. And so I think it makes a lot of sense 6 months in to take a look about what we're gonna do for the next 6 months.
Okay.
Anyone else?
How many houses are in the UGA?
Oh, geez.
Like
Okay.
8,000, right?
30,000, 35,000 in our UGA?
I would have to look that up. I could find it, but I don't know. I do not know that off the top of my head.
I know the population of the UGA is actually bigger than the city of Tumwater, but I don't know exactly what that population is.
I think 30,000 is pretty close.
Yeah. If that's the case, yeah.
So Scott, one thing that we did this in 2020 is we suspended our neighborhood grant program, even though we had it budgeted. And so we didn't spend that money in 2020. Going into 2021, I don't see it in your budget. And I think it would be a really big mistake for us to not engage with everyone we engage with during that process for 2 years. And so, we didn't spend that money in 2020. I'd say wherever that budget item was, we just roll it over to 2021 since we didn't spend it in 2020, and we bring that program back. It's one of the few things where we interact with the HOAs and the neighborhoods, and it's so vital to have that relationship. It's one of the few things where we get to work with the entire city on projects they are unable to do on their own. And so we didn't spend that money in 2020. Let's just push it over to 2021 and do it that way. Can you remind us what that was?
Yeah, so I believe that was about a $60,000 reduction. And again, as I mentioned in the presentation, obviously the sales tax reduction has not been severe. So technically, we could take that savings or that lack of reduction in sales tax, take those dollars and then transfer those into the 2021 budget. Or 2020 budget.
How's the council on that? Would council agree with that?
Well, I definitely would. I can tell you as president of my homeowners association, there were cries of pain when they heard that the money wasn't going to be available this year. They really look forward to that. So,
Deputy Mayor?
So I think it is a way to establish really goodwill throughout our city. They're usually small projects, so you can do a number of them. And so, and some of them are help us, to meet some of our sustainability goals. I think it's great.
Everyone good? Thumbs up?
Okay.
Does anyone else have any
Only
question, Deputy Mayor?
Only I mentioned it, and I'm not sure if our Public Works is applied yet. I think they're going to, but the septic to sewer conversion at the golf course, I know that Lot is allowing us to apply for a certain amount of money that will reduce that cost for at least part of that. It's I think the connection fees and stuff, and but that probably isn't included in this budget yet because it hasn't happened.
Right.
And my only other thing is and Councilmember Miller brought this up, but I would like it to be referred to land use as soon as possible to take a look at the capital city annexation. Here we are spending $25 million on this area, and for us to not recapture that through those customers is such a disservice to the rest of the city of Lacey. So I would really like that to go to land use and start that process, please.
land use would be happy to take on that process.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll try to get that to you in November and bring that forward. And then Deputy Mayor, to your comment on the rebate, apparently the technical subcommittee of lot is going to be reviewing that request. And so that will be going through the lot process.
Oh, good. Also, which is probably not included, we may need to have some money set aside for RIA 13's watershed planning coming up that ecology is expecting from the various jurisdictions. I don't know, but that's going to come up in one of our committees that Julie Rector is going to bring up and stuff, and then to a work session and then council. And I don't know what that exactly means, but we have to have a little bit a set aside, I think, for potential projects.
We've been asked to be a part of that. I told Councilmember Cox that I responded that yes, Lacey will. That in this, they reached out to us and asked us if we'd be a part of that group, and I reported back that I look forward to working with the tribe on that issue. So we need to give an update to this council about what that is, and then who would be our representation, if it's going to be a council member on that committee, or if it's going to be staff, or what it's going to be. So if you could figure that out and let the council know, I appreciate it.
Julie is talking to Scott to schedule it for a committee, probably utilities, and then a work session. I sit on that committee, and then to the council.
Councilmember Greenstein?
I was just going to say, I sat on that committee when I was first elected to the council for a couple of years, but there was never had a meeting. So
that was Riot 11. This is Riot 13.
I'm sorry. I think you're correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Anything else, council?
With just real quick, and I know that this probably isn't, we're not going to have a discussion about this, but with 30,000 houses in the EGA, the projected $400 a house, that's $12.1 million that we're not really realizing. And I know that there's some cost that goes with that, and this is a topic for another time. I just wanted to throw that in there because eventually we are going to have to discuss it.
And not only.
Oh, go ahead.
Well,
go ahead.
I'd only point out the fact that property taxes only bring up about 14% of our revenue base to pay for services. So where we end up short is on the remainder of that 86%. And so that becomes the challenge of how, you're right, we are missing that missed opportunity of that property tax, but it's at a deficit. So it's almost a lost leader for the city of Lacey. So if we do annexation, it just needs to be more balanced with newer commercial or new revenue and sales tax to offset those costs.
Because of services.
Right.
Right. Emergency services and infrastructure would dwarf that tax revenue that you're talking about, Councilmember Miller.
Although we have been talking about this ever since I've been on council about having an annexation plan. I mean, please, let's come up with an annexation plan, because you're right. At some point, Councilmember Miller, we have the largest UGA in Thurston County, and it is not, it's a horrible way for us to provide services to those people, you know, who are, I believe, are not receiving the services they should be, because they should be in the city of Lacey. And so, and the other thing is I'm very interested, and I've talked to our city manager about this just recently, is that there's going to be a new report that TRPC's involved in with the Lacey, Olympia, in the county, looking at the Martin Way corridor, which I think is one of the corridors that should be the most prime for redevelopment, and in all of the county, actually. And you know, you talk to any developer, they're just not willing to spend the dollars to try to redevelop. Councilmember Stedman knows how hard it is to develop on that corridor. It's just too difficult when you're dealing with two jurisdictions.
And it has the least impact on the environment while you do it too.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm interested in seeing what that report comes out, and you know, we definitely need to have a plan going forward when it comes to annexation. I agree. Anything else?
Seems like a lot of topics for a future council retreat.
Yeah.
We've
it was
had
an excellent
conversation before. You know, it's just, I know how hard it is, but it just starts with an annexation, a new annexation agreement with the county.
Hey, did that feel like 114 slides?
You did well.
It was good.
Yeah, and you're right. I'll give all the credit to Donna. All the credit to Donna.
It was excellent, actually. It was.
Donna, you're the best. Okay, we have reached the end of our agenda. Thank you so much, Scott. And we look forward to interacting with the public on this budget coming up in our next council meeting. We'll have our first public hearing. And so until then, you keep it classy, Lacey. I'll call this meeting adjourned.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.